I'm going to be honest with you guys by every metric. I was a terrible Marine during my 4-year career. I never scored higher than a second-class PFT, never attended my MOS's advanced school, was NGP twice, and got non-received for promotion more times than I could count. I barely picked up Lance Corporal, and honestly, everybody gets promoted to Lance Corporal. According to my squad leader, section leader, platoon sergeant, and company first sergeant, I had an attitude and motivation problem. They weren't wrong. I don't truly know why I behaved the way I did. Maybe it was just a lack of maturity. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, trying to escape a bad situation back home. I had a troubled childhood, and I hoped the Marines would help me move forward. Well, as it turns out, people with troubled childhoods typically have troubled adulthoods. Every bad habit I had as a kid followed me into the Marines: drinking, stealing, getting into fights, and being disrespectful to authority figures. You? No. The typical you'd expect from a shitbag terminal Lance. By the time I hit 3.5 years in, my leadership had given up on me. Whatever, I only had 6 months left anyway. Our unit was getting ready for its yearly field exercise at a training area a few hundred miles away from our base. I'm not going to name my unit, base, or the training area for obvious reasons, for the sake of operational security. I guess old habits die hard. As expected, as soon as we arrived at the training area, I was placed on Camp Tax. For those of you not in the know, Camp Tax is essentially where the unit dumps all the shitbags like myself to do work around the cantonment area. Picking up trash, cleaning toilets, working in the chow hall, and other such tasks. What I didn't expect was to be placed on AHA watch. You see, AHA stands for Ammunition Handling Area. And according to USMC regulations, it's placed as far as away from everything else. I, along with 19 other independently minded Marines, was given a 2-man tent, several boxes of MREs, and thrown into a 7-ton heading several miles away from cantonment. What makes AHA watch so shitty, aside from the fact that it's in the middle of nowhere, which says a lot because the training area itself was already in the middle of nowhere, is that we had to sleep outside. This base was in the mountains, and it got cold as hell at night. There was no hot chow, no showers, no bathrooms, aside from the overflowing porta. And, most painfully for me, no PX. I had only brought 1 pack of Marlboros before we left base and had 0 snacks. I would have to survive solely on Mr. E's for the next month and day. Not to mention the fact that my only company would be almost 24 shitbags and all the wild goats that lived out in those mountains. On the ride over, I pondered what I could have possibly done to be condemned to this forsaken duty. There was a long list of options to choose from. Was it because I fell asleep on duty? Or because I got kicked off the last rifle qual range for being a safety violator? Maybe. It was because I wrote pogies on the wall of the radio battalion's barracks. I concluded that it was probably a combination of all three as soon as we got to the AHA. A wide dirt field inundated with green shipping containers filled with various types of ammunition, we quickly set up our tents. As soon as we were done, we were put to work unloading the containers. Alpha Company had their first range in a week, so obviously we had to get their ammunition ready. After several hours of toiling, we finally finished, and I shambled back to my tent to unwind. This became my daily routine for the next few weeks. Wake up, shave, eat, chow, remove ammunition from the shipping containers, unload spent shells and cartridges from the backs of JLTVs and 7 tons. Load the aforementioned ammunition into the aforementioned JLTVs and 7 tons. Eat chow, go to sleep. Rinse and repeat. Then, after one particularly grueling day, after weeks of indentured servitude, all I wanted to do was smoke a cigarette. I'd been pretty good at rationing them, and I had one left. Sergeant Hart, the NCO in charge of the AHA, had promised us a ride back to cantonment, so we could hit the PX and restock. I walked back to my tent, and right away, I knew something was wrong. The flap was open. I scurried over and looked inside. My cigarettes were gone. Fucking thieves, I thought as I stood there. Pondering what I was going to do, I heard laughter. I glanced over in the direction it came from and saw Davidson standing in the smoking pit, smoking a cigarette. Now, I knew for a fact he had run out of smokes a week ago, and no one here liked him enough to give him one of theirs. Rage bubbled inside me, stomped toward him. In hindsight, I could have handled that better. I won't go into too much detail, but let's just say the situation ended with Davidson being taken to see the corpsman and me being put on fire watch all night. And not just for one night, Sergeant Hart made sure I had fire watch for multiple hours every night for the rest of our time out there. To make it worse, he specifically created a new position just for me, the roving watch. That meant I had to walk the perimeter of the AHA for 3 hours every night. After a few nights of this, I was joined by Davidson. Turned out, he was all right. All he had was a black eye. And from then on, he was stuck on roving watch with me every night because he instigated our fight by stealing my cigarette. It was only fair that he got stuck on fire watch with me. At first, it was a little awkward spending several hours every night walking in circles with a guy I had just knocked out. But after a while, the tension faded. Soon, we were talking and laughing like old friends. Him bringing me a pack of Marlboros to make up for the one he stole certainly helped. A few days after, we were condemned to fire watch. Something peculiar happened. A wild goat was found dead. Outside the AHA, it was discovered about 200 meters down the road, and the scene was gruesome. The goat was torn apart, its limbs stripped of flesh almost down to the bone, and the strangest part, its head was missing. Since it was found on the road, everyone's first assumption was that it had been hit by a truck. But that didn't make any sense. The speed limit on these roads was 15 miles per hour, and the chain of command enforced it strictly. With the way the road curved and wound through the mountains, I doubted any military vehicle could even reach 20 miles per hour. A truck hitting a goat at 15 miles per hour wouldn't cause that kind of damage. After Davidson and I hauled the carcass to the side of the road, everyone quickly forgot about it, brushing it off as some strange anomaly. Things carried on as usual for a few more days until another goat was discovered. The second goat was in the same state as the first, mutilated beyond recognition. Someone suggested that a wolf or coyote might be responsible, which made more sense than our initial theory. The wounds did look like some kind of animal had gotten to the goat. But just like before, there were problems with this idea. According to our wildlife safety brief, the goats in the training area were an invasive species with no natural predators. The state occasionally had to bring in hunters to thin their numbers. Someone else proposed that maybe a hunter was responsible, but we quickly dismissed that. Civilian hunters weren't allowed in the area while military units were training. Over the next few days, more dead goats started turning up around the AHA, each one torn apart like the last. And each time, the carcasses were discovered a few dozen meters closer to us. I suggested to Sergeant Hart that we should call the Coke and report what was happening, but he flatly refused. Apparently, he had already gotten into trouble because of the fight I had with Davidson and now company. Leadership was questioning his competence. He was up for promotion to staff sergeant and didn't want another incident jeopardizing his chances. I considered pushing back, but I stopped myself. I knew from experience that an argument between a sergeant and a lance corporal only ever ended one way. More days passed. More maimed goats, their corpses inching closer and closer to our so-called sanctuary. During our watch, Thumpson and I would try to figure out what was causing the depopulation of the local goat community, but we never could. It was too dark, and our tiny flashlights barely illuminated anything. Our NVGs were locked away in the armory back at cantonment, leaving us practically blind to whatever was out there. It remained a complete mystery until one night, Davidson and I were on watch, just shooting the shit, when we heard a shrill scream. It sounded just like a person. We both jumped, spinning toward the direction of the noise. But as soon as we spotted the source, we let out a sigh of relief. It was just a goat, standing on a hill about 20 meters away. It was illuminated by the moonlight. Those old YouTube videos weren't lying. A goat's scream really does sound human. Davidson shook his head and started walking toward it to scare it off. The goats weren't supposed to be near the aha. He was about halfway there, shouting at it to leave, when suddenly something yanked it behind the hill. Whatever it was, we didn't see it. Davidson didn't wait to find out. He turned on his heels and sprinted past me, leaving me standing there. Frozen in terror, the goat screamed and screamed, its cries echoing through the darkness, then silence. I remained rooted in place, too stunned by what I had just witnessed to move. My trance was broken only when Davidson grabbed me from behind and tried to pull me back into the aha. He must have realized I hadn't been running with him and had come back for me. As soon as we got inside, we woke up Sergeant Hart and told him everything we had seen. He didn't believe us, or at least not completely. He dismissed it, saying it must have been a wolf, a coyote, or maybe even a bear. He assured us it wouldn't bother us because animals like that were afraid of people. But we knew he was lying. Hart knew damn well that none of those animals lived out here. He just didn't care. Instead, he told us to get back on watch or heed. Make our last week here a living hell. So, with no other choice, Davidson and I begrudgingly returned to our post. But this time, there were no jokes, no conversations, just silence. We lay prone, our unloaded rifles aimed toward whatever was out there, watching. The next morning, we found what was left of the goat just behind the hill. That entire day, Davidson and I begged Sergeant Hart not to put us on watch outside the perimeter of the aha. We argued that it was unnecessary from a security standpoint. The whole place was surrounded by a tall fence. But he wouldn't budge. This was our punishment, he said. For fighting. For embarrassing him. Desperate, we made him an offer. We'd stand fire watch the entire night. Every night, for the rest of our time here, but only behind the fence, to our relief, he agreed when Sergeant Hart agreed to our terms. It was a relief. Standing an 8-hour fire watch shift every night for the rest of the week was exhausting, but it was worth it. We held on to the hope that Hart had been right, that whatever was out there was afraid of people and wouldn't try to enter the aha. It never did. With only a few days left, we were counting down the hours until we could leave. The field exercise was over. I had survived a month and a half in the wilderness, and as soon as we got back to base, I'd start the process of getting out of the Marines. Things were looking up. Then, on the last night, everything went to shit. The night had actually started off well. Sergeant Hart, in a rare moment of generosity, decided that after weeks of constant watch, we had finally learned our lesson. He gave us the night off. For the first time since we'd arrived, I went to bed knowing I'd get a full 8 hours of sleep. It didn't last. I woke up to something I had, unfortunately, grown accustomed to Sergeant Hart's angry screaming. What do you mean he's gone? Hart barked at a young PFC. I don't know, Sergeant, the PFC stammered. I went to wake him up for his watch, but when I checked his tent, he was gone. Private Locke had a rough time in the Marine Corps. And that was saying something coming from me. He had struggled to adjust to the rigors of infantry life, and now he had vanished. Locke just couldn't handle it since arriving at the unit a few months ago. He had been a constant target of bullying and hazing. To cope, he turned to self-medication. He had failed a piss test right before coming out here, and was set to be discharged with an other than honorable discharge when we got back. According to one of the Marines, Locke had mentioned going a while and catching a flight home. At the time, no one took him seriously. But now, a few hours later, his tent was empty. And his day pack was gone great. "This is the last damn thing I needed," Sergeant Hart growled. Then he turned to me. "You, Davidson, and PFC dumbass here are going to find him and bring him back." I immediately objected. "Sergeant, you can't be serious. It's the middle of the night, dark as hell, and we don't even know which way he went. We need to call this in." I didn't mention the real reason I didn't want to go. I knew he still didn't believe me. Double quotes. "Oh hell no," Hart snapped. "If I call this in to the COC, I'm screwed. Which by extension means you're all screwed. You see the damn problem. Shit rolls downhill." I doubted anyone could really blame the rest of us for this, except maybe the guys on Firewatch who didn't stop Locke from leaving, or the Marine who heard him talk about going AWOL and didn't say anything. For the first time in my Marine Corps career, I was completely blameless in a bad situation. Sergeant Hart could tell I knew this, and he sighed. Look, he couldn't have gone that far. If I had to guess, the idiot probably took the main road back toward cantonment. If you move quickly, you'll catch him. I can't go because I'm the NCO in charge. I can't leave the rest of the Marines here unattended. For all I know, if I leave, more people will run off. Hart gave me a pleading look. And aside from myself, you're the most senior guy here. I trust you to get this done. In hindsight, I shouldn't have let that convince me. I should have grabbed the radio myself, called it in, and let Hart take the heat. But I didn't. I had spent my entire time in the Marines being treated rightfully as an incompetent screw who couldn't be trusted with any responsibility. So, when a sergeant finally handed me an actual task and said he trusted me to complete it, that meant something. Despite all my shitbaggery, I still had some sense of motivation. So, Davidson. Scott, the PFC who discovered Locke, was missing, and I set out down the dirt road toward cantonment. Sergeant Hart figured that's the route Locke had taken, and we didn't have any better leads. Davidson agreed to come because he figured there was safety in numbers. If whatever had been killing the goats wanted us, it could have taken us all. At the AHA, but maybe it was afraid of a large group. Scott came because he was a boot and would do whatever the hell we told him to. Hart had given us 1 hour. If we didn't find Locke by then, we'd call him in on the 152, and only as a last resort would Hart radio it up the chain. At the time, that felt reasonable. As we made our way down the road, Davidson and I kept our heads on a swivel, scanning for both Locke and whatever ungodly nightmare might be lurking in the shadows. The night was cold, same as always, but for once, the sky was clear. Almost an hour had passed. We hadn't found shit, and all three of us were ready to call it. I lifted the radio to my mouth and pressed the key-in button. Echo 5 Hotel. This is Echo 3 Tango. Radio check. I said. Static. I tried again. Echo 5 Hotel. This is Echo 3 Tango. Radio check. Nothing. One more time. Echo 5 Hotel. This is. I was cut off by 3 loud beeps from the radio. I looked at the radio's display and saw that the battery bar was barely a sliver. Ah, hell, I exclaimed angrily. I exchanged a glance with Davidson. Did you happen to bring an extra battery? I asked. He gave me an annoyed look. You're the one carrying the radio. You should be the one in charge of having batteries. I sighed. He was right, damn it. The first time I was entrusted with something important, and I had already messed up the most basic thing. No wonder I kept getting non-received. We should probably head back, Scotty piped up. Sergeant Hart is expecting us to call him soon, and if he doesn't hear from us, he'll assume something happened. If we run, we could probably get back in 20 minutes. He's right, Davidson chimed in. If the sergeant doesn't hear back from us, he'll be even more pissed than before. I reluctantly agreed. I knew Sergeant Hart would be angry that we couldn't find Locke, but at that point, I didn't care. I was getting out in a few months. And soon, all of this would just be another shitty memory to add to my collection. All right, boys, let's go. I was cut off by a shrill shriek that pierced through the night air. All three of us turned, facing the direction of the sound. Standing on top of a small hill adjacent to the road, illuminated by the moonlight-illuminated Locke, and he looked like a complete wreck, disheveled, filthy, as if he'd just come off a grueling 2-week field op with zero rest. His uniform was in tatters, shredded and stained with blood. He was on his knees, panting and gasping for air like he had just sprinted for miles, his body trembling from exhaustion. "Locke, you dumbass boot!" I snapped, barely acknowledging his battered state. "Where the hell have you been?" "We've been looking everywhere for you." My frustration spilled over, and I didn't bother to hold back. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was the sheer exhaustion from spending a month and a half in the field, but I let him have it. "When we get back to the AHA, I'm personally going to you up. Then Sergeant Hart's going to you up. And when we get back to Cantonment, I swear to, before I could finish, something lunged at Locke. An animal, that's the only way I can describe it. But it wasn't like any animal I had ever seen. It was a horrifying fusion of creatures, an abomination. It had the head of a bat, the body of a man, and the claws of a mountain lion, claws that were now tearing into Private Locke's torso, ripping him apart right in front of us. Spine-chilling terror shot through me as Davidson and I bolted down the road, sprinting back toward the AHA with everything we had. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't dare slow down. We had barely covered 100 meters when I realized Scott wasn't with us. Panic seized my chest. He must have frozen up, just like I had the first time I saw that thing. Whipped my head around just in time to witness the nightmare unfold. The creature tore through him with ease. Then, in one swift motion, decapitated him. I gagged, bile rising in my throat, barely holding back the urge to vomit. It wasn't just the horror of what I had seen. It was the sheer speed at which I was running, faster than I ever had in my life. "Where's Scott?" Davidson panted, struggling to keep pace. "Killed him," I gasped, my breath ragged. "Hart should have let us bring our rifles." Davidson snarled through clenched teeth, his voice dripping with fury. He had tried to convince Sergeant Hart to let us carry our rifles with at least some ammunition, but Hart shot the idea down. He didn't want to risk us losing them, or, worse, having a negligent discharge. He insisted that whatever was out there probably wouldn't bother us. Typical Sergeant logic. He knew better than us, of course. It felt like we had been running for hours, but in reality, it had only been a few minutes. The lights of the armor depot were in sight. We were so close. I clung to the desperate hope that if we made it back, we'd be safe. The creature had never tried to get into the AHA before, so maybe it really did fear large groups of people. Maybe we had just been too few. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Davidson falling behind. He was never a good runner. The whole reason he had been stuck on AHA duty in the first place was because he failed his PFT. A few more minutes of desperate sprinting, and he finally collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. "My God." Davidson panted, doubling over. I can't go on, man. Hell, I can't breathe." I skidded to a stop, whipping around to face him. "Davidson, you gotta get the hell up. Come on, we're almost there." I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. I can't breathe." He looked up at me, eyes wide with panic, sweat glistening on his face. His voice was barely a whisper. "Throw me on your back. Carry me." I hesitated, glancing down at him. Davidson was a big dude, way bigger than me. I was scrawny and carrying him would slow me down to a crawl. There was still nearly a kilometer between us and the AHA. Could I make it with him on my back? Maybe, but the chances weren't great. Then I saw it. The creature, sprinting toward us down the road. It's grotesque. Bat-like face twisted into something that could only be described as hunger. Blood soaked its fangs, still dripping from Scott's corpse. We only had a lead on it because it had taken the time to tear him apart. But now it was done, and it was coming for us. My lungs burned, my legs felt like jelly, and the crushing weight of reality slammed into me. I needed another head start, and I knew exactly how to get it. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I left Davidson behind. My leadership had always been right. I was a terrible Marine. I had done the one thing a Marine is never supposed to do. I abandoned my brother to die. Davidson's screams followed me. As I ran, my name echoed through the night as I sprinted away from him. After I had put a few hundred meters between us, the screaming suddenly stopped. I dashed through the front gate of the AHA, nearly knocking over a very furious Sergeant Hart. But I didn't stop to hear whatever asterisk he was about to yell at me. I ran straight for the main radio, shoved the boot radio operator aside, grabbed the microphone, and without any radio etiquette whatsoever screamed, "Help!" over and over again until everything went black. Later, I was told I had passed out due to heat exhaustion. But judging by the bruise on the back of my skull and the migraines I still suffer to this day, I suspect Sergeant Hart knocked me out with his rifle. My desperate call for help had caught someone's attention. When I woke up, I was in a naval hospital. As soon as I opened my eyes, a nurse walked in and told me to stay put, that someone would be coming to speak with me. Before I could ask anything, she turned and walked out. I tried to sit up, but that's when I realized I was handcuffed to the bed. A few minutes later, a man in a suit entered the room. Now, I don't think I'm allowed to go into full detail about what we discussed, but I can tell you this officially. Private David Lockock, Private First Class Lewis Scott, and Lance Corporal Matthew Davidson were declared killed by unexploded ordnance after accidentally wandering into an unsafe area, off into the training area. I was told that if I refused to sign some papers confirming this version of events and swearing that I would never speak about what really happened, I'd be added to the casualty list myself. I was also told that everyone else at the AHA that night was signing similar papers. I had no choice. The only thing they told me about the creature was that they were aware of its existence and that the situation was under control. I left the Marine Corps a few months later and, by the grace of God, managed to get out with an honorable discharge. I tried to forget that night to move on with my life. I started college, got a part-time job, even picked up reading as a hobby. Something I never thought I'd do. That was all several years ago. I thought I had left that night and my time in the Marines behind me. But recent events changed that. I kept in touch with a few of the guys who were there that night. Surprisingly, most of them are still in the fleet and are now NCOs. We never really talked about what happened, not the full story, anyway. Then, a few months ago, someone dropped an obituary in our group chat. It was for Staff Sergeant Daniel Hart. According to the obituary, he was killed in a training accident at the same base where all this **** went down. At first, I thought it was karma at work. After all, he was the one who sent me and my friends to their deaths just to avoid getting in trouble. But a few weeks later, I came across something chilling, a memorial post on Facebook for another Marine who had been there that night. According to the post, he had died from a congenital heart defect. Hell, I couldn't believe it. That Marine was a PT stud, the kind of guy who could outrun and outlift almost anyone. There was no way he had been in the Corps for that long without any symptoms showing. As the weeks passed, more obituaries and memorial posts started surfacing. Every single one was for a Marine who had been at the AHA that night. The causes of death were all over the place. Car accidents, training mishaps, undiagnosed medical conditions. You know, the kind of things that seem normal until you start noticing a pattern. And by my count, I'm the only one left. That's why I'm writing this. I don't think I have much time. For the past few days, I've been locked in my room, too afraid to step outside. I know I'm being watched. From my window, I've spotted a black van driving by repeatedly, the same one every time, right down to the license plate. And I swear, I hear a helicopter fly over my apartment every now and then. That never used to happen. Not until last week. Right now, I'm praying that this is all just paranoia, that I'm not losing my mind. But if it's real, if they're really coming for me, I won't let them make my death look like an accident. I'm perfectly healthy. I don't have any dangerous hobbies, and my job isn't risky. I'm not planning on hurting myself. If they come for me, I'm going to fight. They won't be able to make it look like an accident.